have endorsed me for a second term. I'm determined to keep our city moving forward, and I won't let anyone take us back. Paid for by Aaron Mendenhall for Salt Lake City.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
No accidents reported on your Valley freeways. We have had traffic a little bogged down between the south interchange and 7200 south, and it's already starting to ease again. But overall, kind of a quiet commute on your freeways and main secondaries. Get Mr. Mac's Performance Missionary Package. 1 performance suit, 4 and collars stretch shirts, 3 ties, 1 mission belt, and 1 pair of Echo or Johnston & Murphy shoes, just $595. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy and cooler today and tomorrow with highs in the mid-60s, and there's a chance of rain Thursday and Friday. Right now, we're partly cloudy with 67 degrees. I'm Dan Bombas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As the war in Israel continues to unfold, we're going to bring you the latest updates and perspectives on the developing conflict. And just want to make sure you have all the pieces of the puzzle, that you can connect all the dots and make the news make sense for your world. And as we look at that today, obviously there's so much uncertainty and there is so much instant certainty that we want to make sure we're kind of dividing it all out. Because it's so easy, especially in the fog of war, especially in very sophisticated communication campaigns, that we often miss the real issues, or we jump to a conclusion based on what somebody said. Somebody said they thought they heard somebody say that they knew somebody did, and we take it as fact, and everybody reports on it, and it's really hard to unravel it all. So as we look at all of that, I want to go to the press briefing today with Strategic Communications Director John Kirby, who I think of all of those in the administration is probably the best at very succinctly getting to the essence of an issue and describing the reality of what we know and being willing to say what we don't know in all of these things. So I want to go through a few things that John Kirby shared today because I think they're important from a perspective standpoint. And then I want to look at some of the other things that are being reported or promoted that we need to be careful of and we ought to be thinking about as it relates to what's been happening in the Middle East. So very first, he gave an update on the 2 American hostages, which were released back to their families over the weekend. These are 2 American hostages. And again, as we've been reporting here on KSL News Radio, there's also reports that 2 Israeli hostages have been released just in the last little while. We'll keep you up to date on that. But here is John Kirby talking about the 2 Americans who were released over the weekend.
On Friday, I think you all know, we successfully secured the release of 2 Americans that had been taken hostage by Hamas during the horrific terrorist assault on the 7th of October. And the president had the chance to speak with them and with their families. As he told other families that he met in Tel Aviv, family members of others who have been taken hostage. We have no higher priority than the safety of Americans that are being held around the world, and we're going to continue around the clock to see if we can get them home with their families where they belong. It is literally an hour-by-hour effort here at the White House and at the State Department to find out where these folks are and to try to make the effort to get them out and get them back.
So there's a lot of nuances in all of that. Obviously, the 2 Americans being released is great news for them, for their families. We also know there are at least 10 other Americans that are being held hostage. And interestingly, the call for their release has not been as great as I thought it would be. When Hamas invaded Israel, committed just atrocities beyond atrocities, and took well over 200 hostages, including these Americans. It's been interesting to me that in the past we have always been very adamant and very outspoken as a nation about countries and terrorist groups who take our citizens hostage. And there's been very little about the 10 Americans that we still don't know where they are or what their conditions are. And I only saw one real clip over the weekend of anything significant about those other hostages. And ironically, it came at the New York Football Giants stadium, where they had 10 American flags at 10 empty seats at the stadium to let those hostages know that they were remembered, that they mattered, and that the American people were behind them. But very little beyond that have we heard about the others, American citizens, that are being held by Hamas, a terrorist organization. And so, again, a lot of that gets clouded and glossed over with all the other things that are going on. It's a very complex battlefield and war, and sometimes it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. But there are 10 Americans who are taken hostage for no reason. And that matters. It matters to the debate. It matters to the efforts that are being taken. As John Kirby described, they are working around the clock trying to figure out where they are and what the best passage is to get them out of there and safely back to their families. Now, John Kirby went on to speak about the actions being taken by the military after there were a host of different engagements broke out over the weekend between U.S. forces stationed in the Middle East and many of the Iranian-backed militia groups.
Now, we've also seen over the course of the last few days an uptick in rocket and drone attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups against military bases housing U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. And we're deeply concerned about the potential for any significant escalation of these attacks in the days ahead. At the direction of President Biden, the Secretary of Defense has ordered the military to take steps to prepare for this to ensure that we're postured appropriately, both in terms of being able to defend our forces and respond decisively as needed. The Secretary of Defense has directed 2 carrier strike groups to the region, and we are now sending more air defenses to U.S. air bases in the region.
Really interesting. One reporter asked John Kirby if sending more military resources to the region would deepen the possibility of war and a further spread of the war in the Middle East. Kirby responded that the sole purpose of these actions is actually to prevent and deter war.
The whole reason we're sending that stuff over there is to prevent any widening or deepening of this particular war. It's all about deterrence. And you heard the Secretary of Defense talk. It's not just about naval forces. We're adding some air defense systems and some aircraft squadrons to the region as well. It's all about preventing war. It's all about preventing it.
Now, the last question of John Kirby's portion of the White House press briefing today was really fascinating to me. I sat there listening to it, and it was a very poignant, very direct interaction between John Kirby and a pro-Palestinian reporter. And this speaks to the larger debate that's really being held around the world about Israel's response to the terrorist attack against them and the U.S. role in promoting peace and human rights. And John Kirby is as cool as it gets under fire at the podium. He got unusually emotional during this interaction with this reporter. The reporter asked John Kirby if the administration was failing to consider and address human rights concerns when it comes to Palestine. John Kirby responded that since the very beginning of this conflict, that has been a priority of the administration.
From the very beginning, early hours of this conflict, we made clear, not just to our Israeli counterparts, but to the American people and people around the world, that we take the respect for innocent life seriously. And we have been talking about the law of war since the beginning. You can go back to the first statement that the president made after the attacks of October 7th and see it right there. It's been a part and parcel of every conversation that we've had. And we have been working hard. We have been spearheading the efforts to get that humanitarian assistance in. It came after President Biden spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu in Tel Aviv to get that stuff moving, and within a couple of days, it started flowing. No, sir, we have been working the issue of human and civil rights and protection for innocent life since the very beginning, and that's not going to stop.
So a very interesting exchange here. The same reporter pressed Kirby further and really questioned if efforts to promote peace in the Middle East are now becoming dead and impossible. And here's Kirby's response.
From the beginning of this administration, we have been working for a more integrated, cooperative, peaceful, stable, and prosperous Middle East. That's not going to change. Now, obviously, these attacks on October 7th were horrific, and the Israelis have a right and a responsibility to respond to those attacks. I think everybody understands that. But that doesn't mean we're going to give up. It doesn't mean we're just going to walk away from it. We still believe in the promise of a two-state solution, and we're still going to continue to work for that. We still believe key to eventually getting a two-state solution is normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and we're still going to work on that as well.
You can hear John Kirby pounding the podium very emphatically as he went through in response to a very clear pro-Hamas reporter really questioning everything the administration has done thus far. Finally, the reporter asked about this two-state solution and questioned if that was now dead in the water as a possibility. And Kirby, again, was a little bit exasperated, a little exhausted, but he gave a final response.
I just told you, sir, there's no change in our desire to see a two-state solution. There's absolutely no change in our efforts to try to get normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia as a stepping stone to a two-state solution. But we're not blind to reality. Right now, Israel's fighting to defend itself against Hamas terrorists, and we're trying to help them do that. Right now, the focus of the region is on what's going on. And right now, the president's focus appropriately, sir, is on trying to prevent and widen and deepen this conflict to deter a larger war so that we can get back to the table and we can move forward on those key diplomatic steps.
I thought that was actually John Kirby at his best, clearly passionate about what he was saying, certainly calling out this reporter who had a clear agenda in terms of trying to position things in terms of Hamas. And I thought John Kirby handled it incredibly well. There were a few other things he could have said, but he chose restraint. Restraint always works. And John Kirby modeled that. Even though he showed that passion, he showed that exasperation of, come on, we're actually doing this in order to extend human rights further, to make sure the Palestinian people do have that sovereignty and self-rule, that there is a possibility of a two-state solution, that there are better ties between the different states and nations in the region that can promote long-term peace. And while a reporter was clearly trying to pick and poke and prod to get a response, John Kirby stuck to the principles and the policies that they're trying to go after. And that's a good model for all of us to follow today. I thought it was a very well done press briefing, as is usually the case with John Kirby, whether you always agree with what the policy is or not. Nobody does a better job at defining, framing, shaping a conversation than John Kirby. And today he did it in the face of some pretty persistent opposition who clearly had an agenda. And I think John Kirby proved out that in the end, principles do win out. We'll step aside for a quick break. When we come back, more Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Advertising used to be simple. Your options were radio, TV, newspaper, and let's not forget the yellow pages. Now it seems like a tidal wave of options. Podcast, cable TV, streaming, OTT, CTV, audio networks, smart speakers. On top of that, you need digital marketing for your website along with SEM, SEO, display, video, YouTube, email, and all the social media platforms. Look, you're the expert in your business. Wouldn't it be nice to have an expert to market you? We are Bonneville Salt Lake, the local marketing and media company you know and trust. We reach customers across all digital and social platforms and have the reach of traditional advertising available as well. We find your customer anytime, any place, anywhere on any device here in Utah or anywhere in the world. We work to optimize your results with our in-house local team of experts, providing you with qualified leads, not just impressions. Contact us at aimyourdigital.com for a free consultation, including a complete digital audit with no obligation or cost to you. We are Bonneville Salt Lake. Your success starts at aimyourdigital.com.
Take a second and think about how many different software systems you have in order to manage the people who work for you, and of course the people you want to work for you. There's the applicant tracking, the new hire onboarding, your paid time off, your payroll, time and attendance, your online employee benefits enrollment, ACA compliance, your COBRA compliance, and the list is not just daunting, but it seems every time you turn around, it's growing. It's time you quit losing sleep over that list and let someone else do it for you. Magellan HCM has the technology and local service team to pull all those systems and services into one place, simplifying the process for everyone and significantly reducing the errors that will always occur when you're managing all those tasks in different systems. There is a better way. Magellan HCM. Text HCM to 57500 and set up a demo of their highly awarded technology and see for yourself what a difference Magellan can make for you and your company. Text HCM to 57500.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Visit the contest page on KSLNewsRadio.com. This week, enter to win tickets to the Piano Guys. 3 nights next September at the Sandy Amphitheater. Tickets are on sale now. Or see how you can win Lower Bowl Utah Jazz tickets. Catch the Jazz in action this season with select games airing on KSL News Radio. Plus, win tickets to Straight No Chaser, November 2nd at the Eccles Theater. Get started now. Text the word contest to 57500 or visit KSLNewsRadio.com/contests.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, nuclear energy is really one of the most incredible discoveries humankind has ever made. In many ways, it's made our modern world absolutely possible. And yet, in the face of all of that, we've seen nuclear power has struggled in many ways over the recent decades. And as we look to things that are cleaner and greener and better and more efficient and effective, it's something that is often put on the table and immediately dismissed. And so we want to get to the question beyond that, which is why? Why are we not using more of it, even in transition? And someone who understands this better than anybody I know, Phil Rossetti, Senior Fellow at the R Street Institute. He focuses on energy policy, free market solutions to environmental issues. And Phil, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dig into this. Your piece is so great on nuclear energy, and I want you just to start so our listeners can frame this in their head of just how amazing nuclear energy really is.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a wonder fuel in a way. So if you had a piece of uranium that could fit in the palm of your hand, that would have as much energy as 20 metric tons of coal. It's extremely cheap. So last year, uranium fuel was about 1/10 of the cost per unit of energy as natural gas. And it's about half of our total clean energy in the United States. So it's for as long as we've had it, it's been our largest source of clean energy. So it's cheap, it's clean, it's abundant, and there's kind of this question of like, okay, well, why are we not just using a lot more of it? Why are we just not going all out? And the challenge is when we actually start looking at the economics, even though uranium itself is cheap, the economics of actually building nuclear power plants become extremely complicated, extremely expensive. And the Cato Institute did analysis, and they found that in almost all cases, people are just going to build natural gas or something different than nuclear because of the complexities associated with that.
And so as you break that, I just want to reframe that for our listeners. So 1 kilogram of uranium has as much energy content as 20 metric tons of coal. So just frame that in your brain. So about 800 times safer, cleaner, better than coal, tenth the cost of natural gas. And so why is it that we seem to be avoiding this? Obviously, there's the big things, and you pointed this out in your piece. You've got Chernobyl and Fukushima and some of those disasters, but even those didn't quite to turn out to be the catastrophes they were labeled to be, or that the public believes they are. So walk us through, one, just what that created, and then sort of how the regulatory burden has almost made it prohibitive to tap into this.
Yeah, and the safety and the economics are very intertwined. So basically, when we look at the safety record of nuclear, a lot of people, they immediately think of the big things like Chernobyl. You mentioned Fukushima as well. And when we actually start to look at, okay, what happened and how many deaths there are, nuclear power is actually still way safer than any other energy source by, a huge margin. You mentioned it's 800 times safer than coal, and that's absolutely true. So we look at the biggest incidents like Chernobyl. That was a totally avoidable disaster. And it's estimated that there are probably about 300 to 500 deaths maximum that can be attributable to Chernobyl. And this is actually much lower than people initially expected. Some people are saying like, it'd be 4,000 or even 20,000 or more. And those were all kind of based on these assumptions of radiation exposure causing cancer. And that didn't actually materialize with Chernobyl. And similarly with 3 Mile Island, which was an incident in the United States, there have been no attributable deaths or cancer or anything to 3 Mile Island because it just didn't sort of shake out. So there's a big perception that, this is really dangerous, a lot can go wrong. But that's actually not what we've seen, and especially in the United States and Japan and Fukushima, there's only one radiation death attributable to exposure. Where we have good regulations in place, the safety risks are pretty much non-existent. It's totally safe to use nuclear power and use more of it. But what we start to see is that getting to that point of safety also makes the regulatory requirements much more burdensome. There's no opportunity for the market to sort of temper the economics because you have a tolerance for failure that is zero. So when you have that and you're always having an increase in demand for safety, that just further increases the cost. So Fukushima, 9/11, those are big incidents that increase the sort of scope of nuclear regulation, and that just makes a bigger barrier to entry. And that's why we're not seeing nearly as much of it come online as we would think, given how cheap uranium is.
Yeah, and so as you look at that, and you mentioned 9/11, I thought that was an interesting point you had in your piece, was that 9/11 actually increased that regulatory burden because now we also had to make sure these were being safe from terrorist attack. So that added a whole other level of barriers and regulatory regimes in place to someone who would like to go start one or to actually bring that online. So describe for us, Phil, just as we close out, just give us some perspective in terms of, is there a path forward for nuclear? Can it be part of the solution? And can we get past letting the regulatory regime prevent us from actually tapping into something that's pretty miraculous and actually could be really good for all of us?
It's very interesting, actually, because when we look at all of these sort of transition pathways for a clean future, they almost always say that we need more nuclear than we actually are using today. And the big hope right now is what we call advanced nuclear energy, and that is using newer plant designs that are totally different than what we have now. So right now, most of the power plants are just massive nuclear facilities, and these would be like, the size of 2 shipping containers, and you could kind of have multiples of them or whatever you need. And these designs are so much more safer. They're thousands of times safer than the nuclear facilities that we use today, which are already extremely safe. And so a lot of people are saying, hey, this is a miraculous technology, and it should be able to have a less intrusive regulatory burden because it doesn't have the same sort of safety risks. And you could also produce these, through like factories. You could just churn them out, unlike current facilities where you have to have not just anyone can build a nuclear power plant, right? You don't trust anyone with those sort of specifications. But that's kind of the hope, is that we'll move to these sort of advanced nuclear power plants, build them up, allow them to be sort of dispersed across the country. But the challenge is, ironically, even though they're much safer, that makes the regulatory aspects more complicated, because our entire regulatory system is designed to regulate existing power plants, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has been extremely slow in approving these designs. They only kind of approved the first one pretty recently. It took them almost 20 years, I think, from when the design was first conceived to when it was actually approved. So it's, to be determined, but there is a lot of hope that we will be able to unlock the sort of cheaper, cleaner fuel through advanced reactor designs if the regulatory processes can actually, kind of get in order.
All right, fantastic. Phil Rossetti, Senior Fellow at the R Street Institute. Phil, as always, thanks so much for enlightening us on some nuclear energy today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back.
KSL Salt Lake City.
Listen at home on any smart speaker.
And in your car at 102.7 FM.
This is KSL News Radio,
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top story this hour, a fire set inside South Ogden Junior High today. The school had to be evacuated. KSL News Radio's Britt Johnson has more.
Students were evacuated and buses showed up quickly to get students off school grounds. The fire was set in the bathroom by some students, but there was smoke filling the north end of the building, and the school's fire suppression system also filled that area with water.
Lane Findley with Weber School District says they were able to keep the flames contained to the restroom. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 2 more hostages have been released by their Hamas kidnappers in Gaza. ABC News cites the Israeli Hostage Center, saying the 2 are elderly women, one 85 years old, the other 79. Both are Israeli citizens. These are the 3rd and 4th hostages released by Hamas. A mother and daughter released last week were Americans. More than 200 people are still believed to be held by Hamas. The president of a synagogue in Detroit was found dead outside her home on Saturday. Police believe the murder of Samantha Wolf was not motivated by anti-Semitic bias.
We believe that there are no other groups or anyone else at risk in regards to this particular incident. We believe that this incident was not motivated by anti-Semitism and that this suspect acted alone.
Police say they have multiple people of interest in their investigation, but they haven't identified one suspect yet. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day, 191 points right now. The NASDAQ had been up a little earlier and now kind of slipping back, but still in positive territory by 34 points. And our KSL weather. We've got a lovely fall day, but clouds will move in. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
For over a decade, SimpliSafe has revolutionized home security, and our latest advancement is here, 24/7 LiveGuard protection, only from SimpliSafe. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplisafe.com/radio. Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
Advertising used to be simple. Your options were radio, TV, newspaper, and let's not forget the yellow pages. Now it seems like a tidal wave of options. Podcast, cable TV, streaming, OTT, CTV, audio networks,
smart speakers. On top of that, you need digital marketing for your website along with SEM, SEO, display, video, YouTube, email, and all the social media platforms.
Look, you're the expert in your business. Wouldn't it be nice to have an expert to market you? We are Bonneville Salt Lake, the local marketing and media company you know and trust. We reach customers across all digital and social platforms and have the reach of traditional advertising available as well. We find your customer anytime, any place, anywhere on any device here in Utah or anywhere in the world. We work to optimize your results with our in-house local team of experts, providing you with qualified leads, not just impressions. Contact us at aimyourdigital.com for a free consultation, including a complete digital audit with no obligation or cost to you. We are Bonneville Salt Lake. Your success starts at aimyourdigital.com.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. It's no secret that mortgage rates have risen from historic lows over the last few years. In some cases, having a low mortgage rate can also act as so-called golden handcuffs when homeowners don't want to refinance and lose their rate. One solution to this is a home equity line of credit, or HELOC. HELOCs have higher rate than first mortgages, but they offer flexibility as they are a credit line that can be tapped into as needed. This is a way to take care of financial matters such as debt consolidation, home improvements, medical or college bills, or whatever without losing your current mortgage rate. And when rates come back down, you can refi and take out the HELOC. Call us if this is something you'd like to explore. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
An accident called out at State Street and 100 North, and we do have construction blocking a right lane of traffic southbound I-15 at Riverdale Road in Weber County. Imagine talented vocalists performing your favorite songs with the full power of the Utah Symphony. Get your tickets for the Pops Concert Series at utahsymphony.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
At our KSL weather, we've got a lovely day on tap for today. Perhaps some more clouds moving in by tomorrow, and then it'll cool off on Thursday and Friday. Right now, we're at 68 degrees and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Last week, we saw the Biden administration's strong message in defense of Israel start to turn a little more cautious. This week, reports are coming out that the administration has tried to slow down and delay Israel's ground invasion of Gaza. The Washington Post reports that they wanted Israel to think this through, get things a little deeper and kind of the day after strategy. But is the administration spending a little too much time thinking and not enough time acting in the face of these kinds of conflicts all around the world? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we attempt to go beyond just all the headlines of all of this, we turn to one of our favorite sources, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. Great piece in the Washington Post about how the Biden administration the Washington Post piece was just a background piece we were looking at this morning in terms of trying to slow down the Israel invasion. And Jamil, welcome back to the show. And just kind of give us your perspective, high level first, in terms of what is it that we're seeing from the administration and what does this slowing process look like? Is this strategic caution or is it just caution that maybe be creating some uncertainty?
Well, Boyd, it's a great question, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges here that we're facing is, you know, the administration has said we're leaning forward, we're in support of Israel, we're putting all the weapons and capabilities at their disposal that they need, that they told us they need, and yet at the same time, we know that behind closed doors, there's an effort to say, slow down, wait, don't invade yet, right? Don't take action on the ground yet, in an effort to, you know, on one hand, negotiate for hostages, on another, try to get humanitarian relief in. And third, to sort of push, the Israelis back a little bit and say, hey, make sure you have the right objectives and the like. And, the real question is this our place? Is this the right thing to do? This isn't, by the way, Boyd, what our allies did with us after 9/11.
Oh, that's such a good point. That nobody was saying maybe you ought to slow down just a little bit. Maybe you ought to think through just a little bit. And I'm curious your take, Jamil, in terms of one of the criticisms of the administration has been their ability to take in new information, process it into a strategy, act on it, and then kind of repeat that cycle, which is the real key in these kinds of situations. And I always say the more hesitation, the less inspiration and the less resolve you seem to have because it creates more confusion rather than clarity. Is this one more example of maybe the administration having information overload and a slow process that's slowing this down, or are there other things at play that we ought to be thinking about?
Well, I'm not sure it's information overload more than it is just, pure hesitancy, right? We've seen this time and time again, first in the Obama administration and here now in the Biden administration, where, the stated policy is one thing, and then the actual action on the ground may differ from that significantly. So the president said, we stand by Israel, we respond to terrorism, it's their right of self-defense. And then behind closed doors, a little bit of a slow walk, kind of like Ukraine, right? We support the Ukrainians, we're going to defend them against Russian invasion and the like. And then we slow walk the weapons, attack them, M1 Abrams, F-16. They all take forever to say yes to and then forever to get in the fight. You wonder in the Ukraine scenario how we provided all that a year and a half ago. Might we be in a different place? The Israelis have got to be wondering the same thing. Will the U.S. really be there as they talk to us behind closed doors and say, well, you should really slow down. You should really be more careful and the like.
Yeah, and take us one step further. Unpack that a little bit for us, because I think there are important messages that are being sent both to our allies and also to our enemies, not just in the Middle East right now, but around the world.
Boyd, you and I have talked about this a lot. I think one of the biggest challenges the U.S. faces, and frankly has faced for the better part of a decade and maybe even longer, is that we don't make our foes afraid and we don't make our enemies believe in us. Right? Our allies believe in us, right? Too often our allies are not sure if we'll really be there for them, even though we say the right things. We're not always there. You see things like in the Trump administration, our failure to support the Kurds. In the Biden administration, the walking back of our support for our Afghan allies and leaving them behind in the hands of the Taliban, right? And in the Obama administration, obviously the failure to enforce our own red line in Syria, And whatever you might think of the red line or the merits of it, right? The fact that we didn't back it was something that all of our adversaries watched and all of our allies watched. And now as a result, and we've seen that over and over again, people don't trust us and they're not afraid of us. And that's not a good place for the world's sole superpower to be.
Yeah. And as you look at this whole idea of, I think one of the other challenges for the administration currently, and again, this goes back over several administrations, as you pointed out, Jamil, that it seems to be this de-escalation at all cost, at any cost. De-escalate for, in a box with a fox for on a Wednesday, whatever it is, we should de-escalate. And it seems to me that in that effort to constantly try to de-escalate, we're actually sending a lot of messages that actually cause a lot of things to escalate.
No, that's exactly right. When our adversaries are not afraid of us and our allies don't trust us, it's a lot harder to not end up in a fight. You end up in fights when people don't think your threats are real, right? And don't think that you'll stand by them in a real battle. And so, in a lot of ways, this effort that seems, with an aim to slowing down conflict and preventing U.S. conflict actually probably gets us into more trouble rather than less.
Yeah. And so as you look at the specifics in terms of what's going on the ground, with these reports coming out that the administration is trying to get Israel to slow down a little bit in terms of that process, what does that do for Hamas? What does it do actually on the ground there in Gaza? And how might that actually play out in terms of what comes next in this war?
Well, no doubt it emboldens Hamas. It tells them, look, you can kill 1,400 civilians and get away with it and have the U.S. say, well, maybe it's not the right time for a ground invasion. That is the wrong message to send to a brutal terrorist group. And it's the wrong message to send to our allies who say, hey, when you were attacked on 9/11, we were behind you. No, like you said earlier, Boyd, nobody said, hey, slow down in Afghanistan, be careful about how you execute it, make sure you got the right objectives. Our allies stood behind us and said, you do what you need to do to respond to that attack and to keep yourself safe from further acts of terrorism. We owe the same to our allies in Israel. and the same, frankly, to our allies in Ukraine who are facing the same thing with an attack from Russia. Look, these fights are not that different, and they're not that far apart. The truth is, Iran supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they fund Hamas. This is a real problem.
Yeah, the Iranian connection to all of this is one that I don't think we're having nearly as many crucial conversations as we ought to be having on that part of the equation as we look at whether it's de-escalation or, slow walking things. I think that's a part of the conversation we need to accelerate in a big and loud way. What's something else on your radar this week, Jamil, that you're kind of watching as we enter this kind of next phase of how this all plays out?
Well, unfortunately, I'm looking outside the region. I'm looking at Taiwan and what the Chinese are thinking. They see us shrinking back from the fight there, both in Ukraine with the chaos that's happening in the House right now. We still can't get a speaker elected, right? And the walking back of our once outward support for Israel and its fight against Hamas and Iranian-supported terrorist groups. And they're saying, will the U.S. really stand by Taiwan when the time comes? And the answer to them probably is maybe not. And if that's the answer, they may be inclined, as we're distracted in the Middle East, distracted by a political fight at home and an upcoming contentious election, maybe they say now's the time to go.
Yeah, great perspective as always, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. Jamil, as always, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Boyd.
Great perspective. Love Jamil's thinking and helping us get beyond just the headlines of this. You have to start playing this out in terms of what does it really mean? What are the messages that the United States is sending to our allies? What messages are we sending to our enemies? Those messages matter. And if it's always hesitation, if it's not about real confidence and moving forward, if it's a lot of yeah, but it will support you and it's going to take a long time and it's a slow walk, that emboldens our enemies and it causes our allies to question if the U.S. will really be there in the end. And in the end, the headline is not that will de-escalate things. It will escalate everything in the end.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Have a minute?
I love Jeff Caplan's Minute of News.
It's more of a personal take on the news from Jeff.
Get caught up on the latest news and hear Jeff Caplan's Minute of News for thought-provoking, playful commentary.
It's usually funny. Like he's said before, it varies from day to day, and it's always entertaining.
My Minute of News, it puts a smile on my face.
If you have a minute, you need to catch Jeff's Minute. My Minute of News, weekdays from 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Even though that's an old adage, it's still very true today. And it's especially true of your old 401k. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, asking you to get that old 401k in sight and out of the company you no longer work for. But don't roll it into your new 401k. That could be one of the worst things you do. Of course that's easy. But when has the easiest way ever been the best way? Instead, call Trajan Wealth and learn about all of your options, including a way to earn an upfront bonus of up to 25% for your future income just for rolling it over. That's right. You could earn up to a 25% bonus for your retirement income just for rolling that 401k over with Trajan Wealth. Don't roll that 401k into your new company plan. Don't do it without calling Trajan Wealth first. Call 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
This is the lunch rush at your local deli. Orders are flying in. Online, on the phone, and in person.
Order for Nick.
So is it possible that fast internet could help your business outrun the rush? It is with Comcast Business. Up-leveling your speed with gig speed Wi-Fi, powering all your devices, and fast downloads and uploads, powered by the next generation 10G network. With Comcast Business, next-level speed isn't just possible, it's happening. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Get started with fast speeds and advanced security for $59.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Plus, ask how to get an $800 prepaid card with a qualifying internet bundle. Call or go online to learn more. Ends 11/12/2023. Restrictions apply. Requires paperless billing and automatic payments. New 50 megabits per second internet and security edge customers only. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After 12 months, regular rates apply. Gig Wi-Fi requires gig internet and compatible router.
I never thought about being a donor, but when my daughter Susie was born with enlarged kidneys, it was an immediate concern. Lots of doctor appointments and getting educated on what we'd be facing for years to come. 14 years later, the day came when we were told that Susie would need a kidney transplant to save her life. She is here today because of a beautiful family that gave life.
Go to donorconnect.life and read about what it takes to become a donor. Did you know many people think that they're too old and not in good enough health to be a donor? This is far from the truth. If you were told that you could save a life for someone close to you, would you do it? What if it was just to save a life? Finding out more on why you should become a donor is pretty easy. DonorConnect.life can walk you through the process and what it takes to simply sign up. Check yes to become a donor when you renew your driver's license. Give hope, heal life. DonorConnect.life.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Looking for fabulous food, atmosphere, and tradition? Make your reservation at Five All's Restaurant. Now open Wednesdays. Perfect for a romantic dinner, birthday, or anniversary celebration. You'll love dining at Five All's.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a fire at a junior high school in South Ogden shut down the school while they cleaned up the mess. Second, 2 more hostages have been released by Hamas, both elderly women from Israel. And third, police in Detroit say the murder of a synagogue leader does not appear to be an anti-Semitic hate crime. Right now, 68 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
For months now, the polls have painted a pretty dismal picture for Ron DeSantis and his presidential campaign. Former President Trump, of course, still leads the pack if you're looking just solely at the polls. And DeSantis, interestingly, though, continues to rake in all kinds of endorsements. So it's interesting to see what's underneath that headline in terms of where DeSantis is in the race and why so many continue to come out and endorse his candidacy. And to help us break all of that down, we always turn to David Drucker, senior writer at The Dispatch. And David, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks, Boyd.
And so give us the lay of the land there as it relates to the Ron DeSantis campaign. Many have said, hey, this is a struggling campaign. They seem to be going the wrong direction in a lot of these polls, both nationally and in those key early states of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. And yet so many of the kind of named folks continue to jump on the endorsement bandwagon. Is this just one of those cases where the endorsements just don't match where the rest of the public is, or what are you actually seeing underneath it all?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out. You know, I was watching we saw it in August, but I figured, all right, it's August. You know, we got past Labor Day, and the governor's poll numbers continue to either stagnate or slide. And yet, you know, every few days or so, I'm getting a fresh email from the DeSantis campaign with new endorsements from very prominent activists, people that, you know, want to get involved in a presidential campaign that they think is going somewhere. I mean, yes, they want to get involved on behalf of someone they believe in that they think would make a good president, but these are, you know, the kind of people that get involved. They get involved regularly, and they don't want to put forth effort that they think is wasted from the get. And so I just thought it was interesting, and I'm trying to figure out if there's something going on that doesn't match the polling, or, you know, is it just a case of when you add up all of the votes, they're, even for losing candidates, they're still polling quite a few votes. And so if you extend that to candidates, to activists and grassroots supporters, they can still put together what seems like a very impressive coalition. It just might be that the front runner, Donald Trump in this case, is doing better and will have more. But it certainly doesn't match with a campaign that's, on the verge of collapse.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to break that down, and we're always quick to point out that you don't win the nomination with national polls or even national votes. It's a delegate thing, and it starts in places like Iowa. And you pointed this out in your piece in the Dispatch about the Iowa caucus, that it has a little different makeup in terms of who actually shows up to those events on a winter night in Iowa. Give us some perspective in terms of who's jumping on the DeSantis bandwagon there in Iowa, and how might that impact what we see in early January?
Yeah, it's, Iowa has over the years surprised, even if the nominee or even if the winner of the caucuses hasn't gone on to win the nomination. But just given everything at stake with Trump as the front runner and how hard it's going to be to stop him, if that's even possible, if Trump wins Iowa, I think there's just a lot of extra emphasis on what happens in the caucuses. And as popular as Trump is in Iowa and has been in Iowa, Iowa is filled with a lot of, what I like to say are movement conservatives, right? People that really believe in a lot of what the Republican Party stood for pre-Trump, even if they believed that Trump was the best choice for the presidency in 2016 and beyond. And turnout does not follow as it would if this were a normal primary where people go to the polls all day on Tuesday, any Tuesday, and vote, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. or whatever, various states will do. A caucus is strictly in the evening. You show up at a pre-designated location. Oftentimes it'll be a high school gym or a junior high school gymnasium. And, sometimes the candidates will show up, but this is happening all over the state. So they're not showing up to many of the places, but they'll have people speaking on their behalf, giving speeches, and then you kind of go through this process of elimination. And if your candidate loses on first ballot, you can switch to another candidate on second ballot. But it means that turnout, no matter how big it is usually exceedingly smaller than a normal primary. And to sit there, you don't just show up and vote and leave like you do at a voting booth. Right. You spend an hour or two or more at the caucus site often. And so that's why it really takes somebody who's dedicated. And often in Iowa, it also means somebody that's much more philosophically conservative than your average voter. And so that's why some people, believe that as big as Trump's lead is, it's a little bit too early to sleep on Iowa, because we've seen candidates break late. And look, as well as he did in 2016, he did not win the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
And so that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so interesting to look at all of that. And I want to circle back just to this whole idea of endorsements. And again, you mentioned in your piece kind of this interesting reversal of trajectory where the DeSantis campaign has, as you said, either been stagnant or slipping by a lot of those numbers. And the Nikki Haley campaign has been on the ascent. She's been picking up some momentum and ground. And yet the endorsement bandwagon is nowhere to be seen when it comes to Nikki Haley. Is this going to be a season or a cycle where maybe those endorsements really aren't the determining factor in not just Iowa, but in other places around the country?
Yeah, look, I actually think we're in an era where endorsements really don't matter at all. The reason the DeSantis endorsements struck me, and the reason I reported this out and wrote about it, was because getting endorsements from activists, grassroots and party activists in these early states, is often a sign of energy and enthusiasm on the ground and a belief that the candidate is viable. So it's not so much that, the rank and file voter or even the rank and file caucus goer, somebody who cares enough that we know they're going to show up to caucus, are going to read the newspaper or listen to talk radio, find out that whoever or whatever coalition just got behind DeSantis or Haley or whomever and say, oh, well, therefore they've got my vote. It's just more because that just doesn't seem to happen in this day and age. But it is something you usually don't see with a flailing campaign because people want to go where the energy is or where somebody has an opportunity to win. And look, Nikki Haley's an interesting case here. She's not bereft of endorsements, and she has picked up a few key endorsements a little at a time along the way here. And it does matter whether or not you're resonating with people that are actually going to vote. So I think the key is, does she put herself in a position to challenge Trump either in Iowa or New Hampshire and when the time comes? And, it's sort of been my read on this that if you don't catch Trump in Iowa, you're not going to catch him anywhere else. But if somebody catches him in Iowa, then New Hampshire becomes interesting. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Great perspective as always. David Drucker, senior writer at The Dispatch. A great piece as always. David, thanks for jumping on with us today.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Again, that's David Drucker, senior writer at The Dispatch, and breaking it all down. And I agree. I think David's right on the fact that endorsements just don't mean what they used to. Voters are really looking for that personal connection and what is actually resonating with them, not what somebody else thinks about a candidate. What do they think about the candidate? And where we have so much access to information about all the candidates, makes it a little easier to go just direct to the source. And many candidates are choosing to do just that. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. It's been 5 years since the murder of U of U student Lauren McCluskey. Her mother, Jill, says there have been improvements to campus policing since then, in spite of some key failures that led to her daughter's death.
Didn't have training and policy, so they didn't even look up her murderer's parole status because that could have put him away right there. And it wouldn't have happened if stalking a young woman is definitely a violation of his parole.
Jill McCluskey telling Dave and Dujanovic that campus police have now hired victim advocates and provided online training for officers to spot dating violence. Police in Nephi spotted a stolen car yesterday and followed it onto I-15. Deputies following the car say the driver turned around, started going the wrong way on the freeway. Eventually, the car exited the freeway, took a mountain road near Moab. The chase ended when the car crashed into a ravine. The female driver was taken to jail after being checked out at a hospital. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 2 more hostages have been released by their Hamas kidnappers in Gaza. ABC News cites the Israeli Hostage Center, saying the 2 are elderly women. One is 85 years old, the other 79, and both are Israeli citizens. They are the 3rd and 4th hostages released by Hamas. The mother and daughter released last week were Americans. More than 200 people still believed to be held by Hamas. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading down 190 points today, while the NASDAQ was still on the positive side, up 34. And our KSL weather looks like it'll cool off and maybe get a shower or two. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
If you think you can't afford a home of your own, think again. Even with interest rates as high as they are, don't settle for a townhome or condo when you can build an R5 Flex ADU single-family home with a mortgage payment that is less than a townhome. R5 Homes' new Flex ADU homes are built to be both your dream home and your investment. Live on the upper floors and rent your beautiful basement suite to offset your mortgage payment by close to $2,000. Then, when your family grows and the interest rates go back down again, close one door, open another, and use the whole house as one. The R5 Homes Flex ADU gives you the advantage. Visit r5homes.com to learn more about the benefits of an ADU and view the floor plans. Mention you heard this on KSL and receive a $1,000 credit or referral incentive. Come trick or treat this Saturday, October 28th, and see our best-selling 2-story ADU model in Eagle Mountain off the Ranches Golf Course. Visit r5homes.com for directions.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing. Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our quinces. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit. And make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Professor Scott Hammond. What keeps people in a company when they could make more money elsewhere? What keeps athletes on a team when high-profile opportunities tempt? What brings volunteers into a fire department, emergency room, search and rescue team to give their time and work without pay? It's the social bond we create when we work with others. The caring work families that we sometimes not always create. They are worth more than money, more than promotions, more than individual recognition. If you have a work environment where people genuinely care about you, where you are emotionally healthy, don't sell it for more stress and sometimes more money. Hold on to it for as long as you can. Learn more about creating a positive work environment with an MBA from Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Save $2,500 on a new furnace and air conditioner from Any Hour Services. For more information, call Any Hour Services or schedule a free estimate online at anyhourservices.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Salt Lake City PD have been called to an accident on downtown's west side at Redwood Road and North Temple Valley Freeway. Traffic in great shape, no accidents or delays. The Piano Guys are hitting the road and will be performing 4 intimate shows at Sandy Amphitheater on September 5th, 6th, 7th of 2024. Tickets on sale at sandyamp.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy and cooler today and tomorrow with highs in the mid-60s. There's a chance of rain on Thursday and Friday this week. And right now, 68 degrees and partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Over the course of his presidency, President Joe Biden has visited 2 countries at war. First, it was Ukraine, and last week, of course, he went to Israel. Knowing how dangerous that can be, what it's like to fly with the President of the United States to a country at war is something we want to look beyond the headlines to get into what really takes place on that. And I've been so anticipating and looking forward to this conversation. Really thrilled to have joining us on the program Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, covering President Biden and his administration. He actually flew with the president to Israel. And Peter, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So give us some sense of when you recognize this was not going to be just your pedestrian kind of trip on Air Force One.
Well, there were a lot of moments, but with particular, there was one moment we were flying to Israel, and they bring the security people back to the press cabin. Now, I've been flying on Air Force One since 1996, and these guys did something I'd never had happen before. They gave us a security briefing on what to do if we suddenly came under rocket attack, which of course made sense if you think about it, because Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv has been under rocket attack, is certainly within the range of rockets from Hamas in Gaza, and they were flying the President of the United States right into a place where, you know, anything could happen.
Yeah, so that has to be a little stirring and a little chilling, I think, for the press corps in the back of Air Force One when they're basically being told, here's what you need to do to make sure you get to go home after this trip with the president is over. Give us some more sense as you kind of went through that trip with the president to Israel in a war zone like that. Give us some sense of what goes on. What are the behind the scenes, especially as you're trying to cover and really show what the president's actually doing?
Right. Well, it's pretty unusual. We don't have presidents go into war zones very often. And when they have, they've done it usually secretly. They didn't tell us until, the president was either on the ground or even out of the country in question. This time it had been announced in advance. It was going to be covered live on Israeli TV. Everybody knew we were coming, and they knew where we were going. So you didn't know what that was going to mean. In fact, just the day before, the German chancellor had been at the same airport in his plane when suddenly an air raid siren went off, and the security guys rushed him off the plane to a shelter, and the journalists who were with him were told to throw themselves on the tarmac flat on the ground in case a rocket hit. Fortunately, it didn't. So we didn't know what to expect. Obviously, it was more surreal, I think, than scary. I think it just sort of made the point. They brought the president in very fast. He was only on the ground for 7 hours. Tried to make sure, obviously, a lot of security. But, he was determined to show his solidarity with Israel.
Yeah. One of the things I always love about your reporting and what you included in your piece on this trip to Israel with President Biden is that sense of history. Not the first time a president has gone into a war zone, but give us some of that historic context. I think that's important for us.
Well, it's exactly right. FDR was the first president to ever fly overseas into a war zone. He went to Casablanca during World War II when we had been fighting in North Africa. Of course, they kept that secret. He first got on a train leaving Washington heading north to fool the press corps. I'm not for that, by the way, into thinking he was going to his house in Hyde Park, New York. And then when they weren't looking, turned around and got on a train going south down to pick up the plane that he was going to fly over to Africa. We've seen it since then, of course. Presidents Bush, President Obama, they both flew into Afghanistan and Iraq to do these awfully tight corkscrew landings to try to avoid missiles or rocket-propelled grenades coming at them. But they do it in secrecy at night. They only go to an American military base where they're at least somewhat relatively safe. This is a different kind of thing because we weren't going to a place with American military on the ground. It was a place where basically rockets have been flying, and so it was a bit of a different kind of situation.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your piece the Ukraine trip earlier, which was more kind of in that shrouded in secrecy category of going in quietly and at night and trains and so on. Kind of compare and contrast that with a well-announced, well-publicized, we're coming in the front door kind of approach in going to Israel.
Yeah, and the Ukraine, they don't like to fly visitors into Ukraine for obvious reasons because of the anti-aircraft weaponry that the Russians have. Even if the Russians didn't intend to kill an American president, they might just shoot at a plane they didn't know about. We've seen that happen in that part of the world before. So they brought President Biden, just like they bring in other leaders, by train. It's a 9-hour train ride, an all-night train ride into Ukraine under the cloak of darkness. We didn't know. We didn't announce anyway. Some of us knew, but it was all secret until he got in there safely. This time, as you said, everybody knew. And so, the cameras are on Air Force One as it flies in. The cameras are on the motorcade as it made its way into Tel Aviv. They gave us these little cards, a security card, telling us what to do if there was an air raid siren or a rocket attack. Basically, if we were on the tarmac, for instance, when the president was getting off, and suddenly there was a rocket attack, we were to run to the cars as fast as possible and not to get out of the cars, even though the Israeli protocol is to actually get out of the cars and find some other place to hide. That's a different protocol than the Americans had. They told us we had 1 minute to get to safety, basically. Otherwise, that's when the rocket could hit.
So fascinating. And you also included in your piece what I thought was really a historic moment. A lot of people missed it because they weren't keeping their eye on the television, and that was that on the flight back, the president came back, sweatsuit and all, and talked to the press as you were working your way back towards the U.S. Tell us about that encounter.
He did. He came back during a refueling stop at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. He doesn't do this very often. In fact, in his entire presidency, he's only come back to visit the press cabin one time, and that was off the record. This time, he came back and talked on the record for the first time. He had something to announce. He wanted to say that he had just spoken with President Sisi of Egypt and had an agreement to start allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza. He wanted to make sure that got out. But he took some other questions as well, and he was pretty loose. He was talking about his visit in Israel and his impressions of the trauma that the country had been in. He talked about other things. We asked him about the House of Representatives and how they're going without a speaker right now, whether he felt any bad for Jim Jordan, and he made very clear he did not feel bad for Jim Jordan. He said kind of mockingly, "My heart aches for him." I ache for him, he said.
You also mentioned in your piece that the president did give you all a little bit of a shout out for how hard you had made the trip for him.
Oh, he called it a pain in the neck. Yeah, he could be a little bit. He could be a little bit, snappish at times, but that goes with territory.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to us just for a little bit. You mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to circle back to this about this idea of kind of the misdirection that sometimes administrations give to the press, and that challenging balance between a president and the press. I always say that First Amendment doesn't belong to the presidency, and it doesn't belong to the press. It belongs to we the people. You've been able to experience that in a unique way. Give us some sense of what we should be thinking about as citizens as it relates to that ability to have transparency and accountability, also to protect the office of the president and those critical negotiations, especially in a time of war.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the president's job, obviously, to communicate to the public. It is the president's obligation in a democracy to explain his decisions, his actions, and the reasons why he takes them. And we play a role in helping to facilitate that as the press and to ask him questions he might otherwise not be asked. Remember, it's very rare that a president is asked questions from somebody who's not on his payroll, right? Somebody who might not necessarily be on the team. And that's important. And it tests a president's decisions and decision-making. They don't always like it, and they often bristle at it, and they don't tell us everything. And there's some things, obviously, a president doesn't want to tell in the moment when you're negotiating certain things with foreign leaders or you're worried about hostages who are being held by terrorists. And we understand that, obviously, but it's our job to push for as much information as we can get and present it to the public in a fair and balanced way.
Yeah, and I think that's an important principle for us to really recognize and understand. And the way you frame that, Peter, I think is so poignant. And that is that presidents are often in the room with people who are on the payroll. And it's often that managing up scenario of having the boss hear only what you think the boss wants to hear. And I believe that the part of the role of the press, especially in those settings, is to actually make the president better, to sharpen by asking some of the questions that maybe didn't get asked in the room where it was happening, but need to be asked and answered. And I actually think it makes our presidents, regardless of political party, better at the job.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. President George W. Bush used to say, and I heard him say this, that people would come into the Oval Office and they'd be ready to give the president what for, he said. But when they get in there, they just find themselves, kind of, if not intimidated, at least sort of cowed to some extent by the power of the office, not necessarily by the person, but by the setting and the trappings that come with that. And they kind of temper their messages to a president. Dwight Eisenhower used to have press conferences very regularly, probably one of the most regular press conference presidents we've had, maybe I think once a month. And he thought of it as a very useful action-forcing event because he knew before each press conference he was going to be asked about certain things. And he would push his staff and say, okay, well, where are we on this? Why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it that way? Because he needed to be able to answer the questions himself. So, yes, absolutely. I think that the press-president relationship, as stressed as it can be and adversarial by nature, is still a healthy part of the system, if you ask me.
Yeah, an action-forcing event. I think that's one of the most important things that happens for a leader, whether it's the leader of a company, a business, a community, an organization, or a country. Those action-forcing events, those different kinds of crucial conversations that you don't always get by those who are on the payroll, I think is critical to our constitutional republic. Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, covering President Biden and his administration, was on Air Force One as they went into Israel and covers so many important things. Peter, thank you so much for making time for us on Inside Sources today. We look forward to having you back and continuing this crucial conversation, and hopefully it will be an action-forcing event for all of us today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's good talking to you.
All right. Peter Baker, again, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times. You're not hearing that anywhere else today, exclusive to Inside Sources. An amazing look at the behind the scenes. Imagine being on a plane to cover the president and have people come back and tell you what to do if the rockets hit, or if the rocket sirens go off, or what to do in the case of being under attack at any given moment because you are flying into an active war zone. Those are all things that are not normal, but I love the way Peter goes about the job. And yes, he's there to ask the president hard questions. And it doesn't matter what political party a president is in. The press has a role. The First Amendment is not owned by presidents of this country, and the First Amendment is not owned by the press of this country. It's owned by we the people. And I love the way Peter framed that. And I love how he described historically how Eisenhower would use those regular press conferences as a way to create, as he called it, action-forcing events. You have to get your thinking better. You have to be more clear. You have to be more decisive, unless you're just sitting in a room with a bunch of yes people who are telling you only the things that they think you want to hear. Those are all crucial conversations, some vital principles from Peter Baker from the New York Times today. We'll go ahead and step aside for one last break. Some final thoughts on Inside Sources coming up next right here on KSL News Radio. Stick around.
Exergen thermometers are a top choice of medical professionals at highly ranked hospitals across the U.S. With kids back at school, keeping them healthy is important. Make Exergen thermometer the chosen thermometer for your home or business to check for fever, where accuracy matters. When measuring temperature at home and at work, use an Exergen thermometer to keep your family and colleagues safe. Available at Walgreens and other participating retailers. Learn more at Exergen.com.
Rescue, redemption, recovery, re-entry. That's what happens at the rescue mission of Salt Lake City.
My name's India.
My name is Kelly.
So I was a heroin addict.
I was living in my car.
Then I decided it was time that I got help.
You don't know what to expect.
The rescue mission of Salt Lake does not accept any federal, state, or city funding. Everything is wholly supported through your generous tax-deductible contributions, along with donations of our friends and supporters.
You have a bed, you have a shower. We get everything that we need.
87% of every dollar goes to the rescue mission services. The other 13%, hard costs to run the mission building itself.
Like I have that hope now.
Thank goodness.
From the recovery program to a place to lay your head at night, and meals served every morning, afternoon, and evening all year long, as well as food boxes for families in need. The rescue mission needs our help.
Like a new life, that newfound hope.
That's what I'm grateful for.
Find out how at rescuesaltlake.org.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article or sensitive personal information about your family? Search engines don't always get it right. For right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. One of the most trusted names in online reputation repair, Reputation Defender has been fixing people's search results for over 15 years. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff so that it rises to the top, helping you put your best foot forward. Your good name is too valuable to leave to the whims of a Google algorithm. Take control with Reputation Defender. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-401-6681 to speak to an expert. That's 800-401-6681.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Your home's cooling system has been working hard all summer. Make sure your heating and cooling system continues to operate at peak efficiency by scheduling a $29 seasonal HVAC tune-up now with the pros at Yes. As the seasons change, you can count on Yes to help keep your family comfortable. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
Made to shine. Real stories from Shane Company customers.
So last week, my boyfriend said, I have a surprise for you. And I totally thought he was going to propose, but it was just tickets to a baseball game. Then during the game, Will You Marry Me was up on the big screen, and he was down on one knee holding the most beautiful engagement ring. It was so sparkly.
Our expert jewelers set every center stone by hand, so you'll shine forever. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, it's been 5 years since Lauren McCluskey was murdered by a man she'd briefly dated. Her mother says the U of U has made progress since then on protecting students from dating violence. Second, police in Juab County say the driver of a stolen car turned around on I-15 and started going the wrong way. The car crashed after exiting the freeway. And third, 2 more hostages have been released by Hamas, but there are still more than 200 being held in Gaza. Right now, 68 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, if you missed anything today, you missed a lot, and you need to go back and check it out on the podcast. Just go to kslpodcast.com. Check out Inside Sources because we had some real crucial conversations and some things that are just way beyond the headlines in terms of a lot of the news that you're getting as you go through your day. And that's always our job here, is to give you some angles, give you some nuance, give you some perspective and some principles to hold on to as you try to navigate the waters of really choppy, really wild waters when it comes to news. So we started today, we're talking obviously about the chaos that continues in the House of Representatives. Republicans are reconvening in the next hour and a half. They will begin to hear from the prospective candidates that are going to run to be the nominee for the Republicans for Speaker of the House. And there's a lot of really interesting nuances to all of that. And I think one of the things that has been lost in all of this, we talked about it with Phil Wallach from American Enterprise Institute earlier in the show, and that is that there's been sort of this lost legacy component. We talked about it in the context of Newt Gingrich. Now, whether you think Newt Gingrich is a good guy, bad guy, or whatever, you could probably include him in all of those categories. But he did bring something to the table in terms of the politics of it. He came in with a policy agenda, and he was willing to fight for it. And he was willing to have contested arguments with the Democrats in an effort to create the attention where he could then educate and get to policy. And the Democrats had been in power for 40 years. 4 decades they had been in control of the House. So he had a lot of fodder. He had a lot of things to work with, and he did that. And then sadly, I think Newt Gingrich, along with a host of Republicans, decided that fighting was the answer. And it wasn't the answer. The answer was the principles and the policy. But they decided, no, if you fight, you get attention, and that's how you win. And now we have so many people in Congress, as I always say, they're willing to fight at the drop of a hat. And just in case there's no fight, they bring their own hat, and they'll drop it and start a fight. And that's literally what we're seeing inside of the Republican conference. There shouldn't be a fight inside the conference, but some of them, that's all they know how to do. So that is what they will do. Starting about an hour and a half from now, they will close the doors, have everyone leave their cell phones at the